The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Now, the issue of whether or not Barack Obama has a birth certificate from Hawaii has been out there for a long time. And even some liberals have been saying, why don't they just hand the stupid thing over and the issue's over, the issue's finished. For example, Mr. Thrill Up His Leg and His Entire Body, Chris Matthews, has requested it.
This is an actual birth certificate, a long-form certificate of live birth in the state of Hawaii. This, on the other hand, is what they release generally to the public, a thinner form, doesn't have signatures on it. How's Abercrombie doing on his expedition to find the original document with signatures all over it, like all our birth certificates, like this one here? Don't we want to know if he can find it? And I don't understand why the governor doesn't just say, snap it up, who's ever over there in the Department of Records, send me a copy right now. And why doesn't the president just say, send me a copy right now?
Now, of course, he often refers to, in a pejorative way, those that have been saying, hey, all right, he was born in the U.S., show us your birth certificate, which all of you, I'm sure, most of you can produce at a moment's notice if need be. So anyway, Donald Trump, who's contemplating a run himself for the presidency in 2012 as a Republican, was on The View yesterday, and here is what ensued.
I really believe there's a birth certificate. Why, look, she's smiling, why doesn't he show his birth certificate? And you know what? I wish he would, because I think it's a terrible pall that's hanging over him. He should show his birth certificate. The other thing, if you go back to my first grade, my kindergarten, people remember me. Nobody from those early years.
That's not true. We have pictures of him. What are you talking about?
Okay, show me a picture. I want him to show his birth certificate. There's something on that birth certificate that he doesn't like.
Oh, my God.
That is just
Whoopi,
I'm telling you. Whoopi, I love you. I'm telling you.
I love you, too. I think that's the biggest pile of dog mess I've heard in ages.
There's something on his birth certificate he doesn't want to show.
It's not because he's black.
Let him show. Has nothing to do with that.
Because I think when any white president asks to be shown the birth certificate, when you become a president of the United States of America, you know that he's American. I'm saying that's it.
All right, so you just heard that exchange. Now, WorldNet Daily has been asking for a long time, and they've been doing some investigative work. As a matter of fact, they're about to publish, thank you, sweet baby, they're about to publish a book by Jerome Corsi on the issue. And Joseph Farah is with us, and he is the publisher of WorldNetDaily.com. And also with us is Stanley Cohn, the attorney for Hamas. Yes, that Hamas. Welcome both of you to the program.
Nice to be with you, Sean.
All right, now, Joseph, you've done the most work of anybody that I know here on the issue. And we heard Donald Trump. If you ask the question, all right, well, why not just show us the certificate? You're a birther. You're a birther. That's what you are. And it's not been my number one issue, but I've been following it, and I've been saying, why are all these people that just ask to see it? Why are they crucified and beaten up and smeared and besmirched the way they are?
Well, Sean, I learned a long time ago as an investigative reporter that when public officials refuse to show you documents, there's usually a reason they're refusing to do so. And as you point out, we've been researching this for 2.5 years with a team of investigative reporters, a battery of private detectives, and really the support of millions of Americans. And I thank Donald Trump for raising this issue. I think it's something that, as a potential presidential candidate, it sort of raises the stakes here. And I think it's very appropriate for Americans to begin to question if there's a reason that Obama will not produce this simple document that, we all have to produce at various points in our lives. And when the governor of Hawaii, who claims to be a lifelong friend of Obama, cannot find this document, cannot produce it, it's natural that this becomes an increasingly big issue, an issue that I think touches on both national security.
And by the way, this is not the first time in history that this question has come up now, is it?
No, there are other presidents who have served, and there are a couple of incidents where, there are questions about their eligibility, and there have been cover-ups in the past.
Well,
but that certainly doesn't justify throwing the Constitution.
I think it was Jeffrey Lord. Didn't he bring up the issue of Arthur?
Yeah.
Chester Alan Arthur? And apparently was accused of having been born in Canada, not Vermont, and also of coming to the U.S. from Ireland at 14. I think he did a blog a couple of years back on this, but anyway.
And Jerry's going to deal with that in his book at some length, and I think that people will be surprised by what he found and the historical record on that. But again,
and then Arthur, for those that don't remember, I think he ran as James Garfield's running mate in 1880, right?
That's right.
Okay. I'm just trying to get my facts right. All right, well, love it. Stanley Cohn, I mean, do you have a birth certificate?
I haven't seen one in about 45 years. I have no idea where it is.
Yeah, do you know where you were born?
My parents told me I was born in a place called Port Chester, New York, but my parents tend to float around on issues. But, it's interesting, Sean. There's a perfect solution here. I mean, look, first of all, I'm no fan of Barack Obama. If you want to go after him on 12 different grounds, I'd probably represent you on 10 of them. And you might be surprised to hear that. But there's a very simple solution, and I think it's been tried already once. It's a jurisdictional question. If someone is raising a culpable claim that the president in this case doesn't have the requisite bona fides to hold the office, they should bring an action against them in court. All you have to do is make a prima facie showing. The burden then shifts, and then it's no longer a question of why doesn't Obama want to show it or not show it. Maybe he doesn't care. Maybe he feels like he's under attack. Then the burden shifts. So it shouldn't be just smoke and mirrors and books. If you can get in with enough in front of a federal judge to say, look, I'm a citizen. I voted. I don't believe the guy's a U.S. citizen. If you can show enough to convince a district court, then you get your lawsuit. But all the smoke and mirrors to try to simply say, what's he got to hide, some of us lawyers tend to be stubborn.
Joe, all right, hang on a second. Well, people have been asking for it, and they said at one point they had it, and then they said they didn't have it. They said it existed, but we're not going to show it to you. And it would seem, Joe, what is the status with this?
Well, that has been tried in numerous cases, as you know, Sean, and in every case that I'm aware of, basically the issue of standing has been the problem. That just everyday citizens, even other presidential candidates in 2008 have been found to not have proper standing to ask for the birth certificate, ask for the evidence that's required. And I'll tell you something, I never had
And by the way, I mean, we can go back. Pete Williams once reported about John McCain. There were questions on the liberal blogosphere about whether he was qualified under the Constitution to be president. Dick Cheney had to be ruled a Wyoming resident, if you recall, and therefore constitutionally qualified to serve as George W. Bush's vice president.
What a lot of folks don't realize is that the New York Times and other major news agencies throughout this country in 2008 pressed very hard against McCain, trying to make the case of ineligibility. And of course, there was a Senate hearing on this in which John McCain was forced to produce his long-form birth certificate to prove his eligibility, and Barack Obama got to vote.
Well, let's read the Constitution. The Constitution says no person except a natural-born citizen or citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall be eligible to the office of president. Neither shall any person be eligible, et cetera, who's not attained the age of 35 years and been 14 years a resident within the United States. So now the president takes an oath of office, and I'm sure you've heard it, Stanley, and it's very simple. I, so-and-so, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I'll bear true faith and allegiance to the same. I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter, so help me God, which I'm sure probably offends you as a liberal.
Oh, Sean.
You love me, don't you?
There are a lot of things that offend me, but the silly oath is not high on my chart. Let me ask you a very simple question.
Well, I just read to you what the constitutional provision is. You're an attorney. You say you're a scholar. You represent a group like Hamas. Explain to me, what part of that should we not confirm?
Well, no, but there's a second part to it. Is there an implementing process which says to enforce the Constitution that before someone is found to be eligible for such office, they have an affirmative burden of coming forward and showing the birth certificate, or is it presumptively consistent in the absence of evidence to the contrary? So if you've got evidence that it's not like you have to say, I want to run for president. It's one thing to show you've got to be a certain age. All right. But there are certain presumptions that come with it. There's nothing that is implemented, that amendment that says you have to sign up, produce your driver's license. In the case of Donald Trump, take an IQ test, which I'd love to see his results on. It's an interesting void here. Because while the person is supposed to be a U.S. citizen, there's nothing there that says they have an obligation to come forward to establish it. To the contrary, unless someone can disprove it, then it's presumptively valid. And you know what? If he takes an oath knowing full well he's based upon a lie, indict him for perjury. But in our country, Sean, one of the beauty is that we have certain conditions. Prove your case. And proving the case is simply, we've looked, we can't find it, we don't know where it is, he must be up to no good. Now, the issue of standing is interesting, because standing has to do with taxpayer suits. And that goes back to your question, Sean. The Constitution requires certain things, and unless you present to the court that you satisfy the Constitution, in theory, you would have automatic standing. Those federal judges say, look, we don't allow for taxpayer nuisance suits.
Now, let me go back to Joseph. I got what you're saying. I hear everything that you're saying, but you know something? It seems to me that Donald Trump is right in the sense that this is simple. This is basic. Now, if I know I was born in Metropolitan Hospital in New York, December 30th, 1961. By the way, I was born to be a conservative because I was a tax deduction for that year, Stanley. But in all seriousness, Joe, I don't understand why they just don't put the issue to rest. Why? I know this has been important because you want to constitutionally get an answer. I don't know why you have been beaten up so badly in the press. I'm sure when Corsi's book comes out, it's going to be a huge controversy. Donald Trump is under fire, and he just asked a simple question, and it was even suggested in that exchange he's racist somehow.
That's right. I'll tell you.
Let me give you a simple answer, guys.
You're not Joseph.
Maybe. Listen, I take great offense at him being described as a constitutional scholar or a constitutional law professor at Harvard because he was an adjunct professor and taught a basic course. That's not the issue. Maybe he's being the way I would be in this situation, just stubborn and saying, screw you. Well, you want to go after me? Go after me on something else. I don't have an obligation to expose it and put it out there. If you can.
All right, but you know what? That's weak. But anyway, go ahead.
Sean, I'll tell you this. This issue is going to dog Obama right through 2012. He cannot run away from this. In May, as you said, we'll be publishing this book by Jerry Corsi, who's written 2 #1 New York Times bestsellers, and I got to tell you, this one will be his 3rd, and it's going to lay out the case for Obama's ineligibility more clearly and comprehensively than it has ever been laid out before. Also, at least a dozen states are now working on legislation that will require presidential candidates in 2012 to prove constitutional eligibility. That's something, Stanley, that was not in place in 2008. As we found out, there was no controlling legal authority that validated, that checked except for in McCain's case, of course, the Senate checked him, but nobody checked Obama's. And now we got one of the, potential Republican candidates in 2012 already talking about the issue and demanding to see Obama's birth certificate. The vice is closing in on Obama, and there's no escaping it. He will have to deal with it forthrightly or stand no chance of re-election.
I got to tell you, again, I'm not a big fan of the president. If this guy's going to win or lose on the basis of whether he's got Form 307 of his birth certificate in place, we're in big trouble. There are more than enough issues to vote the scoundrel out if you want to, or vote him in if you like him.
So you think he's a scoundrel? You wouldn't vote for him?
I didn't vote for him the last time.
Who'd you vote for?
I did not. Sean, why should I tell you?
He wrote it in the head of Hamas.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.